Dr. Asher, do you believe that China has a biological weapons program? And if so, what is the percentage of the chance that this virus was designed as a biological weapon?
Well, China does have a biological weapons program. It does involve synthetic biology and gain-of-function technologies, which is why it was particularly distressing to learn that we were providing material aid through financial assistance, scientific knowledge transfer, as well as just complicity to the Chinese communist effort that was centered around the People's Liberation Army. And this is not really a secret. The Chinese have been talking about this for years. Let me also just mention real quick in passing. The people who built the BSL-4 lab, the most dangerous lab in Asia, one of the most dangerous labs in the world for enabling this research, were the French. The French were kicked out. They had been starting to feel the pressure from the Chinese in 2015, just as they started to build this lab. The French government in 2017 was fully evicted, humiliated actually. Their prime minister had gone there for a ribbon-cutting ceremony. I don't think Xi Jinping was there, but his vice premier was. And then like weeks later, they were sent away. Now, they came out and warned people. I was astonished because I was in the biotech sector at the time. I heard all about this. I mean, we were like, well, we better not be working with China anymore because the Chinese are embarked on something that looks like WMD. Why didn't everyone at the State Department know this? And what it really came down to is our non-proliferation bureaucracy, which is separate from the arms control bureaucracy, for whatever reason, just didn't see the importance of synthetic biology and advanced gain-of-function applications in biology as a warfare threat. Well, now we know it's a warfare threat. Was this a weapon? Probably not. It was a weapons-related vector being developed. Okay, a weapon the reason I don't think it was a weapon deliberately deployed, at least, was I just found the Chinese were confused when this originally happened, and they were asking us, what's going on in Wuhan? And then I thought to myself, if they really understood this, why wouldn't they have done what Professor Mueller would say and has said? They would have released it at Fort Detrick in Maryland, just outside the gates, and then they could have blamed the United States. I think this was a laboratory disaster, a biological meltdown, but then they covered it up. And when they covered it up and didn't tell Admiral Giroir and others, essentially it proliferated it as a type of weaponized vector. Any virus that gets out can effectively become a weapon, which leads me to a final thing. You know, the Chinese, again, had told us in 2011 that this was going to happen. They told us that they were going to pursue, in effect, these types of capabilities because they said that's the future of warfare. Well, today we at State and other government agencies, including Commerce, know this. But we have no export controls on gain-of-function technologies from the United States, even into communist China. Now, I'm not for overregulation of my own business area, biotechnology, which, but it can save the world, but it also could end the world. So I encourage you to think, why don't we have just basic level export controls like we do in so many other technologies for biotechnology, especially since we are at the epicenter of the biotech revolution in the world today, and the Chinese are desperate to get a hold of our technology. Thank you.
I think that's an excellent point. Do you think this was an intelligence failure, or do you think this was, decision makers had the information and ignored it?
Well, it was an intelligence failure because if we didn't use the intelligence, sir, between our ears, you understand that the French government had been kicked out, our ally. I mean, the French had worked very closely with the National Institutes of Health. I don't understand how the National Institutes of Health didn't know that the French had been evicted from the #1 Chinese cooperative program in the world. That was apparent. But then there are things I will mention in passing. Some of the information in the declassified fact sheet that Secretary Pompeo presented on January 15th, right here, was dated November, December of 2019. It was all declassified, including the dates of information. We won't say what was classified and what wasn't unclassified. There was a mix, but most of it was very sensitive information. But how did it take a year to get to our desks at the State Department? Maybe it got to your desk the same time it got to us, to your intelligence briefers. I was sort of shocked. It sort of reminded me, have been a senior official at State before and after 9/11. I said, we learned in ex post facto, 2020 hindsight, that we knew somehow in our some system that this might happen. Well, part of it is just policymakers themselves. We didn't emphasize the threat of biotechnology. So, I don't blame our intelligence community. I don't want to hold them to the fire unduly. We didn't tell them this could happen, and we should put this at toward the top of the WMD priorities, not toward the bottom. Because Dr. Mueller, one of the great experts on nuclear war in the world, will tell you it's probably a lot more probable that we'll have a bio-war. It's a lot cheaper, and Dr. Quay has even done some estimates on what a bio-war would cost versus a nuclear war. It's pretty cheap, pretty effective, and I'm more worried now, not just about China, but about every terrorist crackpot that I've dealt with in the world over the last 30 years coming out of the shadows and trying to get a hold of U.S. technology to program these things on bioreactors on a desktop.
So if I may too, just, I spent much of my career in biological warfare defense, both at DARPA and at DTRA, at the Threat Reduction Advisory Committee. And I want to just emphasize that I agree with everything Dr. Asher said. Export controls, but I do want to raise another dirty little secret that really needs to be looked at by Congress, and that those export controls should also include Americans' DNA sequences. This is a really vital piece in general. Even the NIH often exports gene sequencing for many of our people to China. China absolutely keeps databases on what in our genes, what are our susceptibilities, is there a possibility of ethnic weapons. However, China does not allow any sequences of Chinese out of their country. There's a reason for that. So again, I don't want to steal your thunder, Dr. Asher, but it's not just technology, but it's information, and genetic information is really critical.
And the last thing, Dr. Green, just sorry to interrupt, but the one area you didn't mention, which is the scariest, not that you didn't read it, I mean, it's so terrifying, I can't even process it. In the Chinese Declaration of 2011, they talked about, to the Biological Weapons Convention, they talked about systems biology further revealing population-specific genetic markers that can yield an improvement in levels of human health, but also can create the potential for biological weapons based on genetic differences between races. Once hostile elements grasp a difference between different ethnic groups, harbor intrinsically different genetic susceptibilities to particular pathogens, they can put that knowledge into practice and create genetic weapons targeted at a racial group with a particular susceptibility. I am certainly not a racist, but and I've spent my life in Asia. But to hear the Chinese communists talk about ethno-targeting to the Biological Weapons Convention is pretty scary.
Thank you. Shifting gears a little bit, Dr. Garar, you mentioned in some of your testimony earlier, and we've all talked about this, conflicts of interest thing. Could you elaborate on the types of conflicts of interest and perhaps give us some specific examples of conflicts of interest that perhaps were violated in, I don't want to use the word cover-up by our media, but the Lancet article and
So let me first say I'm not accusing anyone of anything, but I want to be really explicit. As a physician, as a scientist, or a person who had NIH grants, who's a professor at a medical school, you know, I did this routine. People are salaried hundreds of thousands of dollars a year, and that is a potential conflict of interest. They want their jobs, they want their money. Millions of dollars in grants. You know, the currency of the realm are NIH grants. You know, when somebody's introduced, they had 30 years of continuous NIH funding. This is not only financially lucrative, but it's also a prestige factor. People who have inventions could make tens of millions of dollars based on those inventions when they sell those to industry. But again, I do believe, and I saw it on a daily basis, and some of these esteemed colleagues have said, you know, there was, you know, President Trump was a controversial figure. Okay, we were controversial in the Trump administration. But there was such bias against the president that even thinking that you were helping the president, you were, you know, excommunicated from the scientific community. And I think that's a really important factor. And if you,
so I want to just dig in on that a little bit. So I'm a physician, and we did in residency, you know, this thing called Journal Club that was designed to teach us how to see bias in medical studies. We would look at, well, were the researchers funded by the drug they're investigating? So breaking it down to the simplest level. Was there selection bias in the population examined in the study? All these different types of bias in science, right? What I just heard from you is that there is a new bias in our scientific community, and it is Trump. And if you are going to research anything that could, you know, prove the president's statements true, then that absolutely is rejected out of hand, and therefore a form of bias. Is that what I'm hearing?
You are hearing that, and I'm going to tell you, and I am not going to go into specifics, but physicians who were on the task force or who were around the task force were under tremendous pressure from their scientific colleagues to not even show up with the president on stage, advising the Oval Office. Tremendous pressure, and they felt it. This was real. And again, I'm not going to read into her, but I'll just say Dr. Burke said she knew her career was over the moment she came to the task force because she would be prejudicially thought
excommunicated from the scientific community because she may have supported some thesis that scientifically was true, and we all know to be true, but Trump supported.
What's not even the thesis, it's just being on the same place with the president. I think
you can't even be in the same room, huh?
Right, and
Huh.
that's true.
And people died because of the false information that has been put out, right? I mean, we know for a fact. I mean, Columbia University, not a bastion of conservatism. Columbia University said 60% of the people who died could have been saved had China just said human-to-human transmission 3 weeks sooner. And this group of people, the media and the Dorseys and the Zuckerbergs of the world who refused, called it a conspiracy theory. Oh, it's a conspiracy theory. People died. That blood is on the hands of the social media giants and the media and the people who refused and just completely supported whatever China and the World Health Organization said. And you have scientists, competent scientists, saying differently and being ostracized. Shame on you.